Hey everyone, welcome back. We're tackling a big one today, housing affordability. And we're not just skimming the surface, oh no. Today, we're going deep.
Deeper than those quick-paid headlines, that's for sure.
You got it. We've got a research paper that's got people talking, do housing supply skeptics learn? Evidence from economics and advocacy treatments. Catchy title,
Yeah,
right?
definitely attention-grabbing.
Plus, we're grounding this whole thing with a real-world case study from sunny San Diego. Get ready for some California dreaming, but with a twist.
It's always fascinating to see how these housing debates actually play out in real communities.
Totally. Now, this research paper, it really digs into this idea that building more housing, even if it's like those fancy luxury apartments downtown, can actually make things more affordable for everyone.
Right, the idea being that more supply should lead to lower prices overall.
Exactly. But the paper says a lot of people, even those struggling to pay rent, aren't convinced.
Yeah, it's not always intuitive. You see a luxury condo building going up, and you think, okay, how's that going to help me afford a place?
So how did the researchers try to change people's minds? Did they like bombard them with statistics and graphs?
Well, they did experiment with presenting people with hard data. Summaries of economic studies showing that increasing the housing supply does lead to lower prices over time.
So kind of like, here are the facts, folks. Did that work?
Surprisingly, yes, it was really effective. But, and this is where it gets even more interesting, they also tried something else. They tested out an analogy, something relatable to explain the concept.
Oh, I like a good analogy. What was it?
Think musical chairs, but instead of less desirable chairs, it's less expensive housing.
Okay, I think I'm following.
So imagine a game of musical chairs. With way too many players and not enough chairs, someone always loses, right? But add in more chairs, even really fancy ones, and suddenly more people have a place to sit. That's kind of like what happens in the housing market when you increase supply.
Okay, that's a pretty good visual. So they tried appealing to people's logic with data and their intuition with this analogy. Which approach landed better?
You'd think the data would be the clear winner, but the research actually found that both the data summaries, 80 the musical chairs analogy, were effective in shifting people's opinions.
Wow, no clear winner, huh? So it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting when they started looking at different groups of people, like homeowners versus renters.
Right, because there's that whole idea that homeowners are like completely against any new development because they're worried about their property values going down.
Exactly. That's the home voter hypothesis.
Yeah.
So they wanted to see if homeowners would be less receptive to these pro-housing supply arguments.
So did homeowners just like completely shut down? Or were they swayed by the data and the musical chairs? Give us the goods.
Here's the thing. They didn't. Homeowners and renters, they were both surprisingly open to the information.
Really? No big difference between the two. You'd think homeowners would be clutching their, what do they call them?
Nest eggs.
Yeah, nest eggs, protecting those property values.
It's a common assumption for sure,
Mhm.
but this research kind of throws a wrench in it. They found that both groups, homeowners and renters, were pretty much equally persuaded by both the data and the musical chairs analogy.
Huh. Well, color me surprised. But, okay, so if people are open to changing their minds about building more housing when you give them the facts, why are these debates still so, I don't know.
Heated.
Yeah, heated. Why are we still arguing about this?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think that's where our case study comes in. It's one thing to look at data and opinions in a lab setting.
Right, but out in the real world?
Out in the real world, things get a whole lot messier.
Oh, tell me about it. Speaking of messy, shall we dive into our case study?
Let's do it.
We're heading down to Pacific Beach, beautiful San Diego, California. Sun, surf, and, well, a pretty hefty housing affordability crisis, too.
Yeah, picture those classic California beaches, those multi-million-dollar beachfront properties.
Hmm.
And then try to imagine finding an affordable place to live anywhere nearby. The tough situation.
Right. So we've got research saying people are more open to building more housing than we thought, and we've got a community where finding an affordable place to live is, like, mission impossible. So what gives?
Well, smack dab in the middle of this whole thing, there's a new development project that's causing a stir. It's called Rose Creek Village.
Okay, so Rose Creek Village. Lay it on us.
So they're planning to build these new apartments. 59 studios at affordable rates, plus 8 tune units specifically designed to help people transition out of homelessness, which I think is amazing.
Wow, that's huge. Especially with so many veterans experiencing homelessness, it's a population that's often overlooked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're building it close to a trolley station to reduce traffic and encourage people to use public transport. They really seem to be trying to do it right.
It sounds like a win-win on paper. So where's the catch?
It should be straightforward, but this is housing we're talking about, so of course there's pushback.
Oh, I should have known there'd be a but in there somewhere. So, what are people saying? What are their concerns with this Rose Creek Village project? Spill the tea. What's got people so riled up about these new apartments?
Well, for one, the building's height. It's planned to be a bit taller than what's usually allowed in that part of Pacific Beach.
Ah, so we're getting into those zoning laws, those hyper-local regulations.
Exactly. And of course, you've got the usual worries about traffic. Even though it's right by the trolley, people worry about more cars on the road.
It's like the classic not in my backyard thing, right? Even when it's something that could really help.
Right. And to their credit, the developers have really tried to address these concerns. They designed the project to be as low impact as possible.
Okay, so less about cramming in as many units as possible, more about working with what the community already has.
Yeah, and highlighting those benefits.
Yeah.
The location, the amenities, the positive ripple effect that could have on the whole area.
So it's this tug of war then, this push and pull. On one hand, you've got the research showing that people are more open to new housing, but then in the real world, those deeply ingrained, not in my backyard feelings pop up. What's the takeaway?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This whole deep dive keeps circling back to that. People can change their minds, but there's something about housing, about where we live, that makes those changes really hard.
It's like our emotions are all wrapped up in bricks and mortar, It's more than just economics.
Right. It's about community, but what we want our neighborhoods to look like, to feel like.
So how do we bridge that gap? Because we need more housing, but we also need to respect people's feelings about where they live.
It's a tough one. But the research gives us some hints. Remember how both the data and that musical chairs analogy got people thinking differently. Maybe the key is to get creative, to make those emotional connections.
So it's not just about the facts, it's about the story we tell about those facts.
Exactly. It's about showing people what's possible, helping them see the bigger picture. And that's something we can all do. It's about talking to our neighbors, our friends, our families about this stuff.
Having those real conversations that go beyond the headlines and the sound bites.
Exactly. And sharing resources like this deep dive. The more we talk about this, the more we normalize the idea that, hey, building more housing can actually be a good thing for everyone.